When I dream about seeds, it's not restful sleep. It's so engaging. So I must confess that I'm a little tired because I dreamt about seeds all night, and they were busy seeds.
Siempre que te pregunto que cuándo y cómo y dónde, tú siempre me respondes, quizás, quizás, quizás.
Yeah, I mean, you just naturally want to get out and get grounded. You want to put your feet or your hands in the ground and touch the earth again, because everything's been in a little bit of a slumber, and you start waking up again and getting excited and being able to plan and know what you're going to be doing, hopefully in the next few weeks or the next month. And I think that you just naturally get excited and you start waking up too.
When it starts going, when the conditions break and you can be out there, then it's like you're out there all the time. And it's this phenomenon of gardening where most of the hard physical engagement is early in the year as you're opening the garden up, tilling beds, prepping beds, and all that stuff. But it's also like when you're really raring to go. And so it's a nice match. The work requires you to be directly, intensely, physically engaged, but I really need that at this time of year.
I want to bring some of my favorite seeds to my friends Venice and Jay. So I'm gonna grab the Pueblo Hubbard, which is my favorite squash, but also the Blue Hubbard, in case they'd want a little variety. This is the Arikara watermelon seed, and I wanted to make sure that they had that.
When I was introduced to biodynamic farming, I had to laugh. I'm like, oh, this is what my grandfather did, right? But regenerative farming, but we recognize that we're also regenerating a reverence for food, because food was used as a weapon against us so much. It was a weapon. Food was weaponized. Soil was weaponized. The growing and cultivating of food was something that was used to enslave us. So part of my call from the seed and my call from the ancestors is again to invite people back to honor and celebrate and deal with that stigma and that trauma and the very real history of what happened. Cultivating your own food and growing your own food and preserving your own food is one of the most powerful things you'll ever do.
These seeds are kind of sleeping, living beings, and we're getting ready to wake them up and share with our community. And they're so valuable and precious to me that I want to make sure that this space is going to be comfortable for them to thrive in, and not just them, but when you show up at Alice's garden, you can't help but feel that there is a lot of care and nurturing and nourishment that gets provided not only for the plants, but for the people that are on the space and that cultivate the space and cultivate those feelings within each other. I've been there when there's been activities, and just seeing the way people interact, I knew that I could leave these with you and they'd be cared for. And I've been out to Wormfarm and got to walk the grounds and have some conversations out there. And I know that what you do is, you help feed our people. And so what better place to give some of these to grow than where it could go back to the people that might not have access to it in any other way. It's like I was drawn there and the seeds wanted to go there and they said it's okay. So here we are getting ready to plan how we are going to be able to collectively share a little piece of ourselves with each other's community and provide that unique nourishment. I know everybody says, the work that I do is towards food sovereignty, but right now, in this moment, it's about food security. And how can you be healthy if you're hungry? And how can we care for our communities if there's people facing that right now? So if this is something that I can do to help contribute to care for your community and for our greater communities, then I wanted to be a part of it and to provide that in the way that I could.
In my training as becoming a farmer, I've learned about the desirability of having a polyculture in your garden, avoiding a monoculture, right? And the sustainability that comes from these different types of plant families that benefit from growing in proximity to one another and make different demands on the soil. And so in my human culture too, I look around and said, I think that diversity in my daily life is really critical too. So anything I can do to foster, to promote, to cultivate those connections, and then it begins at the personal level. It's things that I personally love, but then moving up all the way to the idea of sort of regional sustainability. There's a lot of talk about how important it is for things to be local, and that's really important to have that solid local food shed and the culture shed that what we call at Wormfarm. But it's also really important to have an exchange, keep things flowing, keep them fresh, and keep that fermentation continue to blossom and provide that complexity and the challenges of dealing with different situations other than you've always been used to.
Our best seeds and our dearest fields, those are our children. That's the language that I grew up with. Generations of not just gardeners, but farmers. My great-grandparents, whose homestead is the first that I remember, not because I was planting in it, but because I loved his corn. And I would run through the corn stalks, right? And like, Venus, I didn't plant those for you. But when I think about how my ancestors cared for their seed and their soil, I'm clear that I'm a continuation of every one of their imaginations. But I can remember my father coming to visit. I'm from Pittsburgh, and coming to visit, and he would sit and he would look at previous gardens, not even just Alice's, and he would sit and watch me, and he would say, all that education, and I was raising a farmer. And I'll say, thank you.
I always like to think that it's just, inherent in your blood, and at some point you'll come to what you need to be doing. And those intentions were given to us, and that knowledge and mindfulness generations ago that we didn't know, in hopes that today we would embrace that.
I still save seeds the way my grandmother saved seeds. And my grandmother just made her transition last year at 101. Most of my seeds are in envelopes in my underwear drawer, right? And so my grandmother said, you keep them there because hopefully you're going in that drawer every day, hopefully. And then you're reminded of what's to come and what you're responsible for. She's like, I've never misplaced my seeds when I put them in that particular drawer. And so if you save seeds, you know that you can misplace them, like if you don't have a system. Now, where did I put that envelope? And so even though I have, this case, I still make sure that I have some seeds in my bedroom. My ancestors were able to know, unfortunately, what was coming when they saw folks coming to take them, and were able to put seeds here or there. We've had to reclaim the story of the seed, and we've had to make some seeds our own. What was lost in that middle passage, we always have to acknowledge that we can't regain it. We have some of it because now we go back and forth. And so what we decided at Alice's Garden intentionally in our Field Hands and Foodways program is that we wanted to claim some seeds as our own. So they may not be what our particular ancestors planted, but these are the things that we want to be known for at Alice's Garden. part of this is understanding what we know, and what we have, but also understanding that there are things that we have lost and what it means to reclaim, right? And to say, but this will be mine moving forward. This will be ours.
In cultivating or in harvesting these food sources, you're helping them fulfill their destiny. Like they were brought here
Indeed.
to do that for you. And if you don't do that, then, what did they live for? And I was thinking with this watermelon even, and we had the conversation about the turmoil that was happening in our spaces last year, that forced division. And then all of a sudden, this ancestral watermelon showed up that nourished us in a time when there was a forced division, and it brought us together. And we were like, well, that's what it's going to be. Like it showed up to fulfill its destiny, to nourish us in a way that only it can in a time when we need to be united. And so I like to think that this journey is dictated by them, and we're just following what they've manifested and doing what we need to do to help support them. And then, the reward is invaluable.
A handful of seeds is like the parable of the loaves and fishes. That's a farm story, right? Because you have a handful of seeds, you can't feed many people with those, but you put them in the ground, and then you can feed the multitude. So farmers have that capacity. That's what it's a sacred trust, and tomatoes to me have that sort of that payoff. The tiny little tomato seed, each one of those tomato seeds is going to grow into a plant that's going to yield a bushel, maybe half a bushel. And there's real value in that. I mean, so, we're talking about wealth. I mean, the potential wealth in any given seed is not limitless, but it's like exponential from the cost of a seed. I paid, gave Ruben $3 for a pack of 50 seeds, right? 50 seeds is gonna, how much wealth can, value can one generate from that? So, time, attention, good soil, beautiful elements, and then fundamental wealth is created through the planting of seeds.
When you say the seed and know its story, there's just a different kind of connection. After blessing that watermelon and breaking it open, this is one of, a few plates that it made its way to. The power in the seed is just unimaginable. We say that a seed has a long memory, right? A seed has a long memory. We don't have to instruct a seed on what to do. We don't have to tell this seed, now this is what you're going to become, and this is how you become that. We are responsible for caring for it and nourishing it. As you were talking about, the ancestral legacies between Africans who were stolen and Native folk who were dishonored and displaced, and all of us experiencing massacre. You said you don't know that there's documentation of the seed and but we're the documentation, right?
Yeah, we had talked a little bit about some of these ancestral seeds and just walking through the garden and seeing the beautiful harvest that came and the diversity of what was being grown there. So I was thinking about a time, and I actually work with my sous chef Yusuf on some of the Afro culinary diaspora. And I know that the struggles were not isolated to one culture, race during that time of like these moves, of peoples and from places and homelands, and where there's stories of us having to sow seeds into our clothes. The stories for the Africans that came over were they had to be woven into their hair because they didn't even have clothes to sew them into. And all through that time, the importance of that seed was honored. And in a way, that seed carried that hope with them, knowing that there was going to be that connection. And we had talked about when the Africans were forced cultivators and the natives were forced nomads, and how we were able to nourish each other by bringing seed or by sharing what was grown and having that seed travel. And although there's not any documentation for this, I think that what the seed represents is almost fantastical enough for us to say continuing it. But this Arikara watermelon ended up showing up with me, and the Arikara were moved to North Dakota away from their land. The watermelon came when the Africans were moved. And so it was this beautiful plant that came to nourish both. You know, they traveled with it, and it was a gift. And when it came back to me, I was like, oh, Venus has to have this. It was just like, oh yeah, I finally came for Venus. Yeah.
So when we look at the pink eye hull bean, I went to Alabama to get those and met with farmers, you know, to go south. I wanted to be on that old Cahaba land and be in Selma and meet with the farmers. And I wanted to be on the land that my great-grandfather had to leave. He had to leave his farmland or he would have been lynched on that particular night at sunset because he had grown too large on his farm and had become too wealthy and was tired of being called out of his name. And so when a person of white who was his supervisor on his daytime job kept calling him out of his name and out of his name and out of his name, he hit him over the head with a tool. He did not kill the white man, but that meant that he had to be gone by sunset. And as my great-grandfather made his exit from Selma, Alabama, and my grandmother, who I told you just made her transition at 101, she was 3 years old. As my grandfather is fleeing for his life, he just leaves one major instruction to my great-grandmother, Nellie, and that was, before you make the journey north, make sure you harvest my sweet potatoes and my peanuts. So this man is fleeing for his life. Because he hit this white man, they didn't have to, by law, wait until sunset. But fortunately for him, most of the men who wore those white cloaks were cowards and did not want to be seen in the daytime. So he had time to leave those instructions. And that did happen. And those sweet potatoes and those peanuts were on that train. So it was really important to me that I go back to Alabama, to the very land, to that very corner where that house was, and to visit farmers who shared some of their seed with me. That's been more than a decade, maybe 12 years. And I continue then to cultivate.
If I'm going to be giving you, like, my babies, I wanted to make sure that I gave you something to care for you as well, just to kind of keep with them. There's sweetgrass, which represents the sweetness in the Mother Earth, you know, the beautiful things. There's sage for cleansing. There's cedar for protection. And then there's a little bit of our traditional tobacco in there, which is like the activator of it all. And
Thank you.
The grandfather. So that's for your spirit, to nourish your spirit. Okay. And then I brought you some traditionally harvested and hand-parched wild rice to nourish your bodies, to help give you the strength it'll take to care for those seeds. I mean, it's a literal planting a piece of ourselves in each other's community. I don't know how much more beautiful you can get than that, than to say that, you know, you are providing a space for me, you know, for longevity. And hopefully we can honor that space, and maybe it'll be my time to shine as a chef in the harvest and be able to represent the squash in a way that others can appreciate it.
We build bridges when we share our stories, and both in the commonality and in the uniqueness of it. And how we learn to relate to one another. And there's no better way, in my opinion, to do that, you know, like food and music.
It's the ultimate way to really build the strength and solidarity that we have in unity, and to show the resilience of community and the intention that we put in place years ago and how it's growing into this. And, you know, I got choked up hearing the stories and just thinking of those times and knowing that in this moment, right here, we have a chance to rewrite the narrative.
That's right.
For the future, and to say that this is, you know, intention and planting these seeds. For me, it's you know, planting hope.
And the other thing that's going to happen when we share this story and bring this beautiful seed forward in our community is that folks are going to start reaching into their pockets and into their aprons and say, well, I have this and I have this. So we still need to build bridges within our own community at Alice's Garden, because every season there are new gardeners. And so it's just going to multiply, no pun intended, seeds always multiply. But the seeds that we will be able to share with each other are going to multiply the varieties, and thus the connectedness. It's all about the connectedness.
When this stuff comes to table again and it's transformed, I mean, that one of my favorite things about being a farmer is knowing chefs and being able to present the best that I can do to them to transform it, and again for that moment of communion when we take that into our body. And, it's a really powerful thing, a fundamental relationship, and it's that moment when all of that hard work that goes into you know how many weeks did it take to grow that, and all the care that took to become a fruit that we can now share, and then you come together on the table and share, and then that conviviality, that the sharing and the joy that comes from sharing and being together, and that's what I look forward to. Anyway, I love eating.
Siempre que te pregunto que cuándo y cómo y dónde, tú siempre me respondes quizás, quizás, quizás. Y así pasan los días y yo desesperado, y tú contestando quizás, quizás, quizás.